The sky above the alien colony was gray that day, filled with heavy clouds that hung low like sadness in the air. Inside a round stone room on the edge of the settlement, a baby girl was born, small, weak, and completely silent. Her name was Viral, but no one said it out loud. No cheers came from her family, no celebration, no lights, no music. She was not welcomed with warmth, only with cold stares and silence. In her species, only strong births were honored. If a child was born weak or small, the people believed it brought shame, not joy. Viral's mother turned her face away. Her father never showed up. The midwife simply handed the baby to a nurse and walked away. Another quiet one, the nurse whispered, not kindly. She placed the baby in a soft basket and left her near the back wall, away from the warmth of the fire. Viral didn't cry, even though she was cold and alone. She looked around with wide eyes, but no one looked back. Days passed, and no name day was celebrated for her. In this alien world, every child had a celebration 1 week after birth. Candles were lit, flowers were thrown, and the baby was shown to the sky. But Viral's name day came and went like a shadow. No one brought her flowers. No one painted her name on the wall. She was just there. As she grew, the silence grew with her. When she turned 5, she asked her teacher, "Why don't I have a birth star painted like the others?" The teacher looked uncomfortable, then said, "Ask your family," and walked away. At home, Viral sat on the floor and looked at her reflection in a small water mirror. Her eyes were bright, her skin soft blue like the others, but she felt different. She whispered to the water, "Am I broken?" Her mother, sitting nearby, didn't answer. That night, Viral had a dream. In the dream, the stars came down and hugged her, telling her she was not wrong, just forgotten. But when she woke up, the cold stone floor reminded her that dreams are not real. At age 7, Viral saw something that changed her heart. A human birthday celebration. Across the fence where the human workers lived, there were lights, sweet smells, music, and laughter. The child, just a little human boy, was surrounded by friends, cake, and joy. Viral watched through the gaps in the fence, her tiny hands holding the metal bars. She didn't blink, afraid the colors would disappear. Then she saw it. A round thing with candles, people clapping, and the boy blowing out the lights. He made a wish, and everyone cheered. Viral had never seen joy like that before. Not in her world, not in her home, not in her life. When the party ended and the people left, she stayed by the fence long after. She whispered to herself, "I want that, just once." That same evening, she returned to her quiet home. Her mother had already gone to sleep, the house dark as always. Viral took a small stone and carved a tiny candle on the wall next to her bed. She made a wish in the dark. Alone. "I wish someone would care." Years passed, and the colony forgot about her again and again. No one remembered her birthdays, not even her mother. She stopped asking questions, stopped hoping. But deep inside, a small fire remained, like the candle she carved long ago. Then one day when she was 12, something happened. A new human worker came to the colony. He wore simple clothes, had kind eyes, and a curious smile. His name was Mason, and he fixed water machines. But he also noticed things others didn't. One afternoon, while walking past the outer path, he saw a small girl sitting alone. She was drawing something on the wall with a stick, a shape like a cake with candles. He tilted his head, then softly asked, "That's a cake, isn't it?" Viral froze, not used to anyone speaking to her. She nodded slowly, then looked away. Mason smiled and said, "I like cake too," then walked on. It was the first time someone had said anything nice to her in all these years. She turned back to her drawing and stared at it for a long time, and for the first time since her birth, her lips formed the beginning of a smile. It wasn't full, it wasn't strong, but it was real. Something had shifted. A human had seen her, and that was the beginning of everything. Mason didn't forget the blue-skinned girl sitting alone by the wall. He had only just arrived in the alien colony a week ago, hired to repair the ancient water filters buried under their dusty land. Most humans stayed on their side of the colony, working during the day and returning to their section at night. They followed the rules: don't interfere, don't ask questions, and don't get involved with alien customs. But Mason had never been good at following silent rules, especially when those rules ignored kindness. Every day, as he passed by on his work route, he saw the same girl, sitting alone, drawing with sticks, watching others from a distance, never speaking, never smiling. The others didn't notice her, or maybe they just didn't care. But Mason noticed everything. On the third day, he walked past her again, this time carrying a toolbox and a bag of human snacks. She was staring at a group of alien children, playing with colorful floating orbs. They never invited her, never even looked in her direction. Mason stopped near her, squatted down and asked, "Why don't you go play with them?" She didn't answer, just lowered her eyes and drew a shaky line in the dirt. He waited, then asked, "Do they not like you?" Still no answer came. Only after a long pause did she whisper, "They say I'm weak." Her voice was so quiet it nearly got lost in the wind. Mason frowned, looked at her arms, her legs, her bright, intelligent eyes. She didn't seem weak to him, just quiet, lonely, maybe forgotten. "What's your name?" he asked. "Viral," she replied, almost like she was afraid of her own name. "Well, I'm Mason," he said, offering her a small human snack bar from his bag. She didn't take it at first, only looked at it like it was a puzzle. Then slowly, with hesitant hands, she reached out and accepted it. Her fingers touched his for a second, small, cold, gentle. That moment stayed with Mason all night. He couldn't stop thinking about her when he went back to the human quarters. She was just a kid, but something about her silence felt heavy, like it had lasted too long. He started asking the other workers, "Hey, do you know that girl? The one who always sits alone?" Some shrugged. Others said, "Oh, that quiet one? Think she's from the low-caste families." One human said, "Don't get involved, man. It's their culture." But Mason didn't care about culture if it meant leaving a child behind. The next day, he asked an alien engineer, "What's her story?" The alien blinked slowly, then said, "She was born weak. No one celebrated her." "That's it?" Mason asked. "Just because she was born small?" The engineer looked away. "It's not our way to honor weakness." Mason clenched his jaw. "It should be," he muttered. After that, he started talking to Viral every day. At first, she barely spoke, only nodded or gave one-word answers. But slowly, she began to ask questions. "Why is your skin so pale? What is chocolate? Why do humans celebrate birthdays?" Mason told her everything. He explained how humans light candles, sing songs, eat cake, and make wishes on birthdays. Viral listened like she was hearing a story from another world. One time, Mason said, "I got a toy spaceship on my 7th birthday. I thought I could fly it to the stars." Her eyes sparkled with wonder. "And did you?" He laughed. "Only in my dreams." Viral smiled a little, and that smile hit Mason like a beam of sunlight through a dark cave. He knew what he had to do. He was going to give her something no one else ever had. A real birthday. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the colony, Mason sat by his bunk, looking at a small notepad. He circled a date. Viral's birth record he had secretly looked up. Her birthday was just 4 days away. 4 days to plan something special. Even if small. He had no kitchen, no human oven, just a basic heating unit and a few trade credits. But that didn't stop him. He started visiting the supply depot, asking about sweet ingredients. The cook laughed. "You want to bake in this place?" I want to try, Mason said, for a friend. He traded tools, gave up extra blankets, even cleaned 2 broken water filters just for sugar powder. Back in his quarters, he mixed everything in a metal pot, burning the first 2 tries badly. The third time, it looked almost like cake. Not perfect, but warm and sweet smelling. He found a small candle in a broken emergency kit, cleaned it, and placed it gently on top. Looking at the lumpy little cake, he smiled to himself. She deserves better than silence, he said. She deserves joy. The next morning, as Viral sat alone like always, she heard footsteps. She turned and saw Mason walking toward her, holding a strange, round object in both hands. Steam rose from it, sweet and warm, and on top flickered a tiny flame. She stood up slowly, eyes wide. Mason, what is that? He smiled, and with gentle words said, Happy birthday, Viral. Viral stood still, her eyes fixed on the strange thing in Mason's hands. Steam gently rose from the soft, brown surface, and a tiny flame flickered on top. It smelled sweet, warmer than anything she had ever tasted. She had seen such a thing only once, through the fence, when the human boy blew out candles and made a wish. But this time the cake was for her, not for someone else. For me? She asked, her voice soft like wind through dry leaves. Mason nodded, smiling gently. It's your birthday, isn't it? She didn't answer at first, unsure if she was allowed to say yes. But her eyes began to fill with something unfamiliar. Tears. No one had ever remembered her birthday, not once, not even her own mother. Now this human, a stranger not long ago, stood here holding a cake he made with his own hands. He knelt down and placed it on a clean stone between them. Viral stepped closer, unsure if it was real. It's not perfect, Mason chuckled. I burned 2 before this one, and I don't even have frosting, but it's sweet, I promise. She stared at it, then at the candle, the little flame dancing in the cold air. What do I do? She whispered. You close your eyes, make a wish, and blow out the candle, Mason said. It's a human thing, a way of saying your life matters. Viral looked down, took a shaky breath, and closed her eyes. She made a wish, but not for food or toys or warmth. She simply wished, please, don't forget me. Then she opened her eyes and blew out the candle. It flickered, then went out, leaving a trail of smoke that curled up into the sky. Mason clapped softly. Perfect, he said. Viral reached out and touched the cake with trembling fingers. It was warm, real, hers. They sat together as she took a small bite, her eyes widening at the sweet flavor. She had never tasted anything like it. For the first time, something bloomed in her chest. Joy. Not just happiness, but the feeling that she mattered. Mason didn't say much, just watched her eat slowly, peacefully. And in that quiet moment, the silence around her didn't feel cold anymore. That night, Viral returned home, carrying what was left of the cake carefully in a cloth. She hid it under her bed, not to keep it secret, but to protect the feeling it gave her. She didn't want it to disappear. In her heart, a small voice whispered, someone remembered me. But outside, not everyone was smiling. The next morning, an elder of her colony saw Mason and asked sharply, what were you doing with that girl? I gave her a birthday cake, Mason replied simply. The elder frowned. You interfere where you do not belong. We do not celebrate weakness. Mason's eyes narrowed. Then maybe your people forgot something important. He walked away before the elder could say more. But word spread. Some called it a shameful act. Others whispered behind closed doors. Yet not all the whispers were cruel. A few children asked their parents, why don't I get a cake too? One mother hesitated before answering, her face unsure. The next day, Viral found a drawing left beside her sitting spot. It was messy, made with a broken stick and colored dust. But it showed her smiling with a cake and a candle. She looked around, saw a small alien boy peeking from behind a wall. He didn't say anything, just waved once, shy and curious. She waved back, her heart thudding in her chest. The wave felt like sunlight on cold skin. Later that evening, Mason came again, this time sitting beside her without a word. "I think you started something," he said, half smiling. "I didn't mean to," she replied. "I just wanted to know what a cake tasted like." Mason laughed softly. "Sometimes that's enough." They sat in silence, but it was a warm silence this time, not like before. Viral turned to him, curious. "Why did you do it? Really?" He paused, looking at the stars. "Because someone once did the same for me, when I was a lonely kid, and it changed everything." She nodded slowly, understanding more than words could explain. That night, Mason began gathering supplies again. Not for a second cake, but for something bigger. A small table, some cloth, and candles. He had an idea. If one birthday could light a spark, maybe more could fan it into fire. He wanted to do something for all the forgotten ones in this colony. But first, he would start with Viral, because she was the proof that one act of kindness, one cake, and one quiet girl could start a wave of change. The next morning, Viral woke up before the first sun touched the colony walls. Her heart was beating fast, like something inside her didn't want to forget the feeling from yesterday. The cloth under her bed still held the small cake Mason had made. Now a little hard, but still precious. She touched it carefully, her fingers soft, as if the cake would disappear if she pressed too hard. This wasn't food anymore, it was proof. Proof that someone saw her, someone remembered her, someone believed her life mattered. Viral walked slowly toward the usual place where she sat every day. But this time, something was different. The same children who used to run past her, without a glance now slowed down to look at her. One little girl with purple eyes even smiled, just for a second, before running away again. Viral blinked, unsure if she imagined it. When she reached the stone wall where she always sat, she gasped. A small flower was sitting there, with a ribbon made of string tied around it. It was wild, crooked, not something expensive or fancy. But to her, it felt more beautiful than any crystal jewel. She looked around, but no one claimed it. She picked it up slowly, held it against her chest, and sat down with her eyes closed. Maybe the world was changing, just a little. Mason arrived a short while later, carrying 2 cups of warm liquid. He handed one to her and sat beside her like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Morning," he said. "You slept all right." She nodded. Better than ever. They drank in silence for a few minutes, the heat from the cups warming their hands. Then Viral spoke. "Someone left me a flower." Mason smiled. "Yeah? Must be someone who saw you shining yesterday." "Shining?" she asked, confused. "When you smiled," he said, "it lit up more than just your face." She looked down, hiding her smile again, but not out of shame this time, out of shy happiness. Later that day, something even more surprising happened. 2 children came near her during the break hour, holding small fruit pieces. They didn't say anything, just placed the fruit beside her and walked away quickly. She didn't chase after them, didn't even speak. She just looked at the fruit like it was treasure. Every moment today felt like a dream, like she had stepped into a different world. And maybe she had. That evening, her mother saw the flower in her hand and asked, "Where did you get that?" Viral hesitated, then answered softly, "A friend." Her mother didn't reply, just stared at the flower for a moment, then walked away. Viral didn't expect anything more. Her mother's silence still hurt, but it no longer defined her worth, because now, even if it was small, she had tasted what belonging felt like. And once someone feels that, they can never forget it. The next morning, Viral found Mason setting up something unusual outside his work zone. A small table, made from scrap metal, stood in the middle of the open area. He placed a white cloth over it, a single candle in the center, and a hand-drawn sign that read, "You matter." Children gathered slowly, curious, unsure what it was. Viral stood nearby, watching as Mason pulled out a small container of sweet bread. He broke it into pieces and offered it to the children. "No need to pay," he said. "Just take one if you've ever felt alone." One brave girl stepped forward, took a piece and smiled. Then another and another. Soon the table was surrounded by laughter, crumbs, and sticky fingers. Viral stood frozen, watching it all. This time, the joy wasn't far away. It was here, around her, near her, waiting for her to step in. She walked up slowly. Mason looked at her and said, "You started this, you know?" "No, you did," she replied. He shook his head. "I just brought a cake. You're the one who changed hearts." She didn't know how to reply to that. So she took a piece of sweet bread and sat on the edge of the group. The children didn't push her away, didn't laugh, didn't whisper cruel things. They just accepted her. That was all she ever wanted. Later, as the second sun began to set, casting golden light across the colony, a small group of parents arrived. They didn't yell, didn't stop the gathering. They just watched, confused, curious, maybe even a little moved. Mason greeted them politely, explaining the table, the bread, the meaning of it all. Some parents turned and left, others stayed. One even asked quietly, "Can adults take a piece too?" Mason nodded with a soft smile. Of course, especially those who forgot what kindness feels like. Viral watched it all unfold, her eyes wide, her heart full. She wasn't just a shadow anymore. She was part of something now, something that tasted like sweetness and hope, and she knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. The next morning, the alien colony woke up to something strange. Not a storm, not danger, but something even more powerful: rumors. Soft voices spread through the dusty alleys and sharp stone towers. "Did you see the human give her a cake? He made it himself with sugar and heat, just for her. Is she important now? Is she still weak? Or something else?" The elders didn't like it, not one bit. Tradition was being questioned, silence was being disturbed, and worst of all, a forgotten girl was being noticed. One elder marched straight into the work zone, where Mason was fixing a rusted water tank. "You?" the elder barked. "You're making trouble." Mason didn't even look up from his tools. "I'm fixing pipes," he replied, calm and cool. "Not those pipes," the elder snapped. "You're changing minds." Mason stood up, wiped his hands, and looked the elder in the eyes. "If kindness is trouble," he said, "then maybe this place needs a little more of it." The elder frowned, his tendrils twitching with anger. "You're a guest here, human. Stay in your place." Mason's voice was steady. "My place is beside the ones who've been forgotten." The elder stormed away, but the fire had already spread. All over the colony, children were talking about birthdays. They were asking their parents why no one celebrated their births. Some mothers hesitated, some fathers gave cold replies, but many had no answer at all, because deep inside, they remembered their own childhoods, filled with silence and cold. A few even began to wonder, what if the human is right? Meanwhile, Viral walked through the colony paths like a shadow no more. Some still turned away, but others looked at her with curiosity, even respect. One old merchant waved at her and said, "You look brighter these days." Viral smiled softly. "I feel lighter," she said. Back at the edge of the settlement, Mason was setting up the table again. This time, two alien kids helped him place the cloth and smooth the corners. They brought small things to share: dried berries, sweet nuts, painted rocks. Mason didn't ask them to. They just came, As if pulled by something invisible and warm, Viral joined them, carrying the flower she had received earlier. Now pressed in a small glass box, she placed it at the center of the table, and everyone nodded in quiet agreement. That flower had become a symbol, a sign that even one act of love could grow roots. That evening, something unexpected happened. A girl from one of the high families, dressed in fine robes, walked up to Viral's table. Everyone fell silent. She looked at the offerings, then at Viral and said, "My birthday is next moon cycle." Viral blinked, unsure what to say. The girl added, "Can I have a cake too?" Mason chuckled, "If Viral agrees." Viral looked at the girl, then slowly nodded. "Yes," she said, "but you'll have to help make it." The girl smiled, nervous, but real, and said, "I will." The whisper spread even faster now. A high-caste girl asked for a cake. She spoke to the weak one. She even smiled. The elders met in the central hall that night, anger and confusion filling the room. "This human has undone centuries of order," one elder growled. "They bake cakes and make children soft," another hissed. But one voice spoke up, an elder with graying skin and calm eyes. "Or perhaps we made them hard for too long," he said, "and lost something important." The hall fell silent. That same night, Viral returned home, where her mother was waiting at the door. Usually the house was dark, cold, empty, but not this time. A single candle burned on the table, small but steady. Viral stared at it, unsure what it meant. Her mother said nothing, just nodded at the chair. Viral sat down slowly, her eyes never leaving the tiny flame. Then her mother placed a bowl of sweet liquid in front of her, warm, spiced, and clearly made with care. Viral picked up the bowl, took a sip, and looked at her mother. For the first time in her life, they shared a meal in silence that didn't hurt. Later, under the twin moons, Mason found Viral sitting by the table, alone but peaceful. He sat beside her and asked, "Long day?" She nodded, "But a good one." "People are starting to see you," Mason said. "They're starting to see themselves," Viral replied. He looked at her with quiet pride. "You've become more than just a girl," he said. "You've become the spark." She leaned back, looking at the stars. "It was just a cake," she whispered. Mason shook his head gently. "No, it was a key, and you unlocked something that had been locked for too long." And far across the colony, where lights were rarely seen, a few homes now glowed with tiny candles. For the first time in many years, warmth had started to return. Not just to homes, but to hearts. The colony was no longer quiet, not in the way it used to be, silent and cold. Now it buzzed softly with something new, something alive, something dangerous to those who feared change. Hope. Small lights began appearing in windows, not just for warmth, but for meaning. Children whispered about birthdays, about candles and cake. They asked questions their parents couldn't easily answer. Why didn't I have a birthday? Was I not worth celebrating? Parents stood frozen, caught between old beliefs and new feelings they didn't know how to name. Some scolded their children, others avoided the topic, but many sat in silence, staring at the soft flicker of candlelight in the dark. Viral had become a name spoken throughout the colony, not as a curse or pity, but as a symbol. Some called her the girl with the candle heart. Others simply said, "She was remembered, so maybe I can be too." But not everyone welcomed the change. The elders called an emergency meeting in the central stone chamber. Their voices echoed against the tall walls as they argued. This celebration madness must end. One barked, "It weakens the young. Our customs are ancient," another said. Not toys to be changed by a soft human hand. But the oldest among them, Elder Quan, spoke quietly. Or perhaps the human hand is not soft, but strong enough to carry forgotten children. Silence fell. They could feel the storm building. Not a weather storm, but a storm inside the people. Back near the work zone, Mason worked longer hours trying to stay out of the politics, but knowing it would come to him eventually. He fixed pipes by day, baked at night, using old parts to build a small heating unit that could make better cakes. More children visited, not for sweets, but to help. They stirred the mix, washed the bowls, even drew decorations for the table. Viral stood beside them now, not outside the circle, but inside it. Her eyes were bright, her voice stronger, her steps no longer quiet like before. She was no longer the girl sitting alone near the wall. She had become the heart of something bigger. One day, while handing out slices of a fresh cake, a shadow fell over the table. It was the high speaker, the most respected elder of all. Everyone froze. Children dropped their hands, unsure if they were in trouble. Mason stood still, his eyes steady but calm. Even Viral held her breath. The high speaker looked at the table, at the children, at the drawings, then at Viral. He spoke softly. "Are you the girl who received the first cake?" Viral nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. The high speaker studied her for a long moment, then asked, "What did it feel like?" The question surprised everyone. Viral swallowed hard, then replied, "It felt like someone saw me, like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible anymore." The speaker looked at Mason. "And you?" Mason answered gently, "I didn't mean to start anything. I just couldn't watch a child go unseen." The speaker turned back to Viral and said something no one expected. "Would you tell your story to the council?" Her eyes widened. "Why?" "Because our children are beginning to ask questions," he said. "And perhaps it is time we answered them." Word spread like fire. The high speaker spoke to the human. He asked the girl to speak in the hall. "What does this mean? Are the traditions falling?" Some were angry, afraid. Others were curious, hopeful. The day of the council meeting came, and the great hall was full. Not just elders, but workers, children, parents, even those who never spoke before. Viral stood before them, her hands shaking at first. Then she looked at Mason in the crowd, and his quiet nod gave her courage. She spoke, not loudly, but clearly. She told them about her birth, the silence, the emptiness, the years of being ignored. She spoke of the cake, the candle, the wish she made in the dark. And then she said something that made many eyes tear up. "I thought I was weak because no one ever celebrated me," she said. "But I was never weak, just unseen." The room stayed silent for a long time. Then the high speaker stood and asked a single question. "What if we are the ones who were weak, too afraid to show love, too afraid to change?" That night, for the first time in known history, the colony allowed a celebration under the stars. It was small, with music, warm drinks, and cakes made by alien children with human recipes. Candles were lit, not just for Viral, but for every child born in the last cycle who never had a birthday. Laughter filled the air, hesitant at first, then louder, stronger, freer. Mason stood to the side, watching Viral dance with the other kids. She laughed without fear now, moved without doubt. The girl who had once whispered wishes in the dark now shined under the moonlight. And as more candles flickered across the colony, one thing became clear. The storm had come, yes, but it had washed away the silence. And in its place, something beautiful had begun to grow. The moonlight shimmered on the white stone paths as if the stars themselves had come down to watch. The colony, once cold and silent, now glowed with soft candlelight. Children danced around small fires, holding ribbons and sweet bread. Parents watched, some still unsure, some still afraid. But most had begun to understand. Something old had broken, and something new had been born. Viral stood at the center of it all, wearing a hand-woven dress, stitched together by other children from scraps and string. On her head sat a crown, not made of gold, but of wildflowers, berries, and tiny candles. The crowd gathered in a wide circle as Elder Quan stepped forward, carrying a large cake on a silver plate. It was taller than the others, shaped like a rising star, covered in colors made from crushed fruits and glowing dust. He placed it in front of Viral, then turned to the crowd and said, "This cake is not just for her. It is for all of us." The people listened, eyes wide, hearts quiet. For too long, Elder Quan continued. "We believed silence was strength and celebration was weakness." He looked at Mason, standing nearby with his arms crossed and a proud smile on his face. "But this human reminded us that love is not weakness. It is power." The wind stirred gently as if agreeing. Elder Quan turned to Viral. "Child, would you make the first cut?" Viral nodded, stepping forward, holding the simple knife made from wood and metal. She sliced into the soft cake, and as the crowd clapped, she felt something deep inside her bloom. It was more than joy, it was freedom. One by one, pieces were passed out, not just to children, but to elders, workers, even those who had once looked away. Mason stood beside her now, holding a cup of warm tea. "You did it," he whispered. She shook her head, smiling. "We did it." From that night on, everything began to change. The council voted to create an official day called the Day of First Light, a day to celebrate every child born. No matter how small, how quiet, or how strange, every birth would be welcomed with candles, music, and cake. Every life would be honored from the start. Mason was offered a medal, a gift of thanks, but he refused it kindly. "I don't need a medal," he said. "I just needed to know no child will be forgotten again." Instead of leaving the colony when his work contract ended, Mason chose to stay. He built a small bakery near the gathering square, where he taught others how to make cakes, muffins, and joy. Viral became his helper, then his partner, not just in baking, but in rebuilding hearts. Years passed, but the story of the cake never faded. Children who were once like shadows now had stars painted on their doors. Families lit candles together, told stories, sang songs, and made wishes out loud. And every year, on the day of first light, the colony celebrated with one giant cake. Bigger than before, brighter than ever. They didn't just remember Viral's name. They told her story to every child. She was the girl no one celebrated, until a human brought her a cake. And everything changed. One evening, long after the first celebration, Viral stood by the garden outside the bakery. Mason joined her, wiping flour off his hands. He asked, "Do you ever think about how it all started?" She nodded slowly, looking at the stars. "Every day." "And do you regret anything?" he asked. She turned to him, her eyes full of light. "Only that I didn't meet you sooner." He smiled. "You would have met someone else eventually." She shook her head. "Maybe, but not someone who knew how to bake hope into a cake." They both laughed, soft and warm, like friends who had been through a storm and come out shining. And as the candles across the colony lit up once more, the world they helped shape glowed with a new kind of power. Not the power of strength or silence, but the power of kindness. And all it took was one cake,